Hey everyone, Temporal here, and I'm going to do another video on goats. This time I'm going to be covering a powerful setup for baiting either a kill or a meaningful resource lead, as well as how to use a flank set play to take the opposing Rein even when you haven't generated any sort of resource lead. So I'm going to start with the bait play. And what I like to do for this guy is you set your team up around a corner and then you push forward or you set up ahead of the corner and you go ahead and move your Reinhardt, move your whole team right to the point where your Reinhardts are basically breathing on each other. Then you go ahead and take a bubble swing at their Reinhardt, use projected bubble, that's just fine, and you speed boost your Reinhardt and your whole team right back to your corner. Your Reinhardt tucks right behind the corner, and you set up sort of forming a concave to protect him, your Briggs, your Zarya, and your Diva in that order. You'll notice we've set this up with your most survivable tank kind of in the most danger, the furthest away from safety. Now, there's only so many ways that the opponent can respond to this, right? You've gone ahead and burnt your team bubble and your amp. So that seems like an opening that the opposing team could take advantage of. But the truth is it's really not. Because the way that they'd like to take advantage of it is they'd like to go, hey, we have amp and bubble advantage, chase that Reinhardt. If they chase your Reinhardt right around the corner like that, and you've properly deployed your concave in time, their Reinhardt is going to round the corner. Your whole team is going to be able to annihilate him, even with bubble advantage, before the rest of his team can really get any damage on your Reinhardt. So that's not really on the table for them as an option. Obviously, there are other things they can do. You're not using your Rein shield to protect your off tank, so they could shoot at your off tanks, right? Yeah, they absolutely could poke at your off tanks, and that's not really going to bother you at all. While they're poking at your off tanks are shooting back at either their Reinhardt or their Rein shield and creating a resource lead there. Now, that might seem silly to you because you might be going, hey, what? The opponent is doing real health damage to your team, whereas you're probably doing shield damage to their team. That's actually a good trade in a lot of situations because if your tanks get into any danger, lose half their health, whatever, they can retreat back behind your corner and behind your own Reinhardt. And now that damage is going to get healed up just by passive aura generation from your Lucio aura and from your Inspire. That works out pretty nicely, because now you can continue to take that slow fight. You've actually ticked off time as they've been poking on you to get closer to having your bubble cooldown back. Great, you have a resource lead on them. And you got to do this poke while you had a higher energy Zarya, because you used an extra team bubble there. If instead of poking at your off tanks like that, they try to swing wide at the choke so they can take a more neutral fight, that's great. That's really just an extension of the poke fight. Same thing. You're poking at them, doing damage to either their Reinhardt or the shield, which is more useful than damage to your off tanks, as long as your off tanks aren't put in serious lethal harm, as they'll get it healed back up. They rotate back behind your Rein. You're now taking a lateral fight with each other, but you got a nice shield health lead on them. Another option that the opposing team could go with is they could go, okay, hey, your Reinhardt's tucked too far behind that corner, so we're going to go ahead and all in on your Diva or your Zarya or your Briggs. Well, they could go for that. Instead of poking them, they could try to speed amp onto one of them, go for them, force a kill on your Diva or whatever, since she's the most exposed. You don't super mind if they do that, because that's going to work in one of two ways. If they swing wide and then go for that push, your Diva's just going to retreat behind, kind of like we talked about in the poke scenario. And if they try to just straight run at them without doing a rotation, that's going to tuck their Reinhardt in enough that you're going to happily go, I'm going to take your Reinhardt in exchange for our Diva, because they're pushing their Reinhardt pretty much into your concave to take that Diva. And if their Reinhardt is in your concave, doesn't matter if he's a bubble, he's getting attacked by all of your heroes. His shield cannot possibly help him enough because he's surrounded. You can take that kill in exchange for your Diva mech, and honestly, even if you lose the whole Diva, not just the mech, that is still a good trade, as you'll have a chance to stabilize behind your Rein shield, which is just going to snowball you the win in the fight. So the end result of this play, if you executed it right, if you got off your bubbled swing on their Reinhardt and then were able to quickly retreat behind your corner and set up your concave in the proper order to protect your Reinhardt, is going to range from you kill their Rein pretty much for free, you trade an off tank for their Rein, still good, still great in fact, you get more energy than them and are winning the shield battle as they push in laterally, that's fine. Or the last option is they just go, okay, yeah, that sucks. You got away with it. We're going to go back to playing goats. And maybe they try to rotate past you to get to the point, get to a place where you're not set up, etc., etc. All of those are pretty good outcomes. Cost you nothing, nice little bait play, nets you an advantage of some sort. The other play that I wanted to go over here is frequently you will see teams try to go just mad aggressive, hey, let's all press W to try to kill the opponent's Reinhardt without much thought applied. That's bad most of the time. I think I've covered pretty well why that's bad in last week's video. But there are ways that you can do aggression if you've set it up properly without generating any sort of resource lead. My favorite way to do this is to set your diva up nearby on high ground at some sort of angle. This is really powerful on Hanamura first, Dorado first point right off of red. There's lots of good places for this, but really what you're looking for is a place where your diva can shoot, tickle, whatever, the Reinhardt with damage at an angle that is different than your team, so she can get damage onto his health rather than strictly onto his shield. That lets you start to do a little work, tickle him a little, maybe be a bit distracting. In this scenario, you don't really want to bait a ton of damage onto your diva. There's scenarios where it's fine if they do. If the team tries to put a bunch of damage on your diva, that's not a big deal. Your diva backs off, returns to her team, gets healed up by auras, and while that was happening, you were trying to win the shield war. But really what you're trying to do with this play is generally more of a like, hide your diva, don't let her take damage, and on your call, you both amp speed to run at their Reinhardt, and your diva micro missiles and DMs as she flies in behind the opposing Reinhardt. What she's looking to do is boop their Reinhardt towards your team that's amping in to basically force that same concave. Now, there's of course counterplay to this. If they're ready for it, if they're really on it, if they have projected bubble, a bubble will stop diva from knocking Reinhardt. But even that's not the end of the world, as you've dropped a heavy source of damage that can take a little bit of a beating and that you're willing to trade for their Reinhardt right behind their Reinhardt as your team pushes forward and finishes the concave around their Reinhardt. So you want to go with something like that. It is worthwhile to, if your diva is going to be slightly at an angle, not directly behind, make sure that your Zarya is on a opposite side of your Reinhardt from your diva. That helps maximize your spread. Make sure you're in a situation where their Reinhardt, if he does try to hard shield, is having to pick between Zarya, divas, and Yada. You want to really make that decision really hard so it can't be blocking multiple sources of damage. And again, if they trade out your diva Mac or even your whole diva, as long as you got your Reinhardt, you're perfectly fine with that. And you're totally fine if you lost the shield war as you were setting up this play, etc., because you know shields aren't going to be fully drained in this setup. You're looking to trade out for their Reinhardt there. So obviously the tell for this play, if you're playing against a team, is, hey, if their diva's separated, they may be going for something like this. So that's something you do want to keep in mind. In general, if you see a team separate both their diva and their Zarya from their Reinhardt, they've been too greedy and you should just immediately all in them. That's something that you can do. That's good aggression. But as something to mix up, something else you can do instead of just this diva boot play to still do aggression with a proper setup is you can mix in Lucio boot plays. Lucio can't have much the same effect as diva. It doesn't force the surround quite the same way, but you can of course hit a boop with your Lucio to try to force the Reinhardt into your team. This is not as good of a play. Your Lucio's much more vulnerable to getting bashed and just dying and losing the fight. Your Lucio being on a flank also means that your Lucio isn't offering his aura as sustained to your team. It's making your team get in a little slower, etc., as they rush to meet the boop. So it's definitely overall not as strong. But if you do this play with the diva a couple times, the team is going to start tracking your diva. The team is going to see, hey, your diva's right there. So you can throw them as a curveball. Hey, you see our diva. In fact, we're showing you our diva. And then we hit you with the Lucio play, just as a way to mix things up. Anyway, that's what I've got for you guys today. I hope you guys found this useful. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comments. Thanks, guys. Temporal out.